The church was packed, every single seat filled. White roses lined every pew from the entrance doors all the way to the altar. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Sunlight came through the stained glass windows in long, golden columns. Everything was perfect. Except for one thing. Daniel Carter stood at that altar in a rented suit that was just slightly too big for his shoulders, his hands trembling, his eyes wet, holding a ring that had taken him 8 months of savings to afford. He was smiling, the kind of smile that only appears on a man's face when he truly believes this is the greatest day of his life. 200 people sat in those pews, his mother, his sister, his closest friends, every person who had ever known him. They were all watching, and they were all smiling back. And then the doors at the back of the church swung open. But it wasn't Sophia walking down that aisle. It was her maid of honor, alone, walking fast, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. She stopped in front of Daniel, leaned in close and placed a small, folded note in his hand. Daniel's smile did not disappear immediately. It faded, slowly, the way a candle dies when every last breath of air has been taken from the room. He unfolded the note. Read it once. Then again. Then. A third time. And then right there, in front of every person he had ever loved, Daniel Carter's knees buckled. The note said 4 words. I chose better, sorry. But what Daniel didn't know, what not a single person in that church knew, was that in exactly 6 months, those 4 words would cost Sophia everything she had ever wanted. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something about Daniel Carter. Because this is not just a story about a man who got left at the altar. This is a story about what happens when someone mistakes loyalty for weakness, when they look at patience and call it poverty, when they stand next to a person who would have walked through fire for them and they call that person not enough. Daniel grew up in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, Ohio. His father worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant. His mother cleaned offices on the night shift. He watched them every single day, give everything they had, and still barely keep the lights on. And Daniel made himself a promise, a quiet, serious, unbreakable promise. He was going to build something real, something lasting, something that could not be taken away. He had a patent on a logistics software he had been developing for 3 years, a platform that could cut supply chain costs for mid-sized companies by up to 40%. He had a startup, he had a plan, and he was 6 months away from his first major investor meeting. Sophia knew all of this. She just didn't believe in it anymore, because somewhere between the ring she called too small and the holiday she called too budget, Sophia had already made her decision, and nothing Daniel could do was going to change it. Let's go back. 6 months before that church, 6 months before that note. Sophia Reeves was, by every definition of the word, stunning. Long dark hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately understood that she was the most beautiful person in it, and had quietly built her entire sense of self around that fact. For 3 years she had been with Daniel. She had loved him in the beginning. Back when it was late nights in the university library, cheap takeout on a blanket in the park, dreams whispered quietly in the dark of a rented apartment that smelled like old books and instant coffee. But then she met Marcus Hale. Marcus Hale was everything Daniel was not on the surface. He drove a Maserati. He had a penthouse on the 42nd floor in Manhattan. He wore watches that cost more than Daniel earned in 3 months. And he had noticed Sophia at a charity gala. "You're too beautiful," Marcus had said to her that night, handing her a glass of champagne with a smile that had clearly been used many times before, to be with someone ordinary. Sophia had laughed, shook her head, said something clever, but she had not forgotten those words. Over the next 4 weeks, the texts began. Then the secret lunches, then the lies. Working late again. Girls' night out. Just a client dinner, don't wait up. And Daniel, loyal, patient, deeply trusting Daniel, believed every single one. Until the evening he came home early. Roses in his hand, a reservation, waiting. And heard Sophia's voice through the cracked open bedroom door. What she said, in that moment, changed everything. "Marcus, I can't keep doing this. I need to make a real decision. And honestly, I think I've already made it." She heard Daniel's key in the lock, spun around. The phone fell from her hand. The roses hit the floor. There were no more lies after that night. But there were no real conversations either. Just 2 weeks of cold, suffocating silence. Until Sophia sat across from Daniel and said the words that should have ended everything right then. "I still want to get married," she said, her voice calm, her eyes steady. "I just need you to understand something. I need more, Daniel. I need a man who can actually give me the life I deserve." And Daniel, because he loved her in that complete, unguarded way, that is both a gift and a vulnerability, said yes. He would try harder, work faster, be more, be enough. But Sophia's phone buzzed at midnight that same night, a message from Marcus, and she smiled at the screen in the dark, while the man who had just promised her everything lay sleeping beside her. Here is the question Sophia never once thought to ask. She never asked what the patent was actually for. She never asked who the investors were. She never asked why Daniel had been spending every single weekend locked in his home office, headphones on, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and quiet determination. She assumed it was nothing, because in her mind, Daniel was nothing. He had already been filed away, a chapter she was preparing to close. But 3 weeks before the wedding, 3 weeks before that note, something happened that Sophia almost witnessed. Daniel received an email. The subject line read, "Preliminary term sheet, Series A funding, $4.7 million. He read it once, then again. Then he closed the laptop, walked slowly to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and stood at the sink, looking out the window at the street below. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor, and he laughed, quietly, to himself. For about 30 seconds, 3 years of early mornings and rejected applications and rewritten code and investor meetings where men in expensive suits had told him politely that his idea showed promise but wasn't quite ready. 3 years of Sophia sighing at restaurant menus and making quiet comments about the apartment being fine for now. And now, $4.7 million sitting in his inbox, asking when he was available to talk. He had planned to tell Sophia over dinner that night. He had made a reservation at the restaurant where they had their first date. But Sophia wasn't home, she was at a work event. And so Daniel Carter sat alone at that restaurant table, a future worth millions glowing quietly on his phone, while the woman who was about to leave him had absolutely no idea what she was throwing away. The wedding morning arrived the way those mornings always do. Too fast, too bright. With a kind of merciless, unforgiving clarity. Daniel had paid for everything. The church, the flowers, the catering, the live band, the photographer. He had stretched every available dollar because he wanted, genuinely and completely, for Sophia to have the wedding she had always dreamed of. His best man, James, had pulled him aside the night before. They were standing in the hotel corridor after the rehearsal dinner, and James had his hands in his pockets and a look on his face that he was very clearly trying to hide. "Danny?" He said it quietly. "Are you absolutely sure about this? Because something feels, I don't know, off. She's been cold for weeks. She barely looked at you at dinner tonight." "She's nervous," Daniel said. "It's a big day. She loves me." "Danny, she loves me, James." James said nothing more. But he did not look convinced. The morning of the wedding, Sophia stood in front of the mirror in her bridal suite, looking at herself in the dress. The dress was beautiful. She was beautiful. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. Her phone sat on the vanity, face down, but she knew what was on it. Marcus's message from the night before. Still there, still waiting. "You don't have to do this, Soph, you know that. Come to me. I'll take care of everything. You deserve a life that matches who you actually are." Sophia looked at herself in that mirror for a very long time. Then she picked up the small notepad on the vanity, and she picked up a pen, and she wrote 4 words. "I chose better. Sorry?" She folded the note, called her maid of honor into the room, handed it to her, said very calmly, very quietly, "Give this to Daniel, tell him I'm sorry." Then she took off the engagement ring, set it on the vanity table. The ring Daniel had spent 8 months saving for. She set it down, gently, precisely, as if she were placing a period at the end of a sentence. And she walked out of the church, through the back exit. She did not look back. While at the front of that church, Daniel read those 4 words in front of 200 people, and the sound that followed was the worst sound in the world. Silence. His mother started crying first, a small, helpless sound, then his sister, then the silence spread through the entire church like something physical pressing down on every person in every pew. Daniel folded the note, put it in the breast pocket of his rented suit, turned to the priest and said very quietly, "I'm sorry, we're done here." He walked out of that church alone, head up, back straight, not a single tear on his face. He saved those for later. That night, alone in the apartment they had shared, Daniel Carter sat down on the kitchen floor. The same floor where he had laughed to himself about that funding email. And he stayed there for a long time. And when it was finally over, when the last of it had passed through him, he stood up, washed his face, sat down at his desk, and opened his laptop. He typed 3 words in reply to that funding email. 3 words that were, in their own quiet way, a declaration. "I'm ready, let's talk." Meanwhile, Sophia's new life had officially begun. Marcus moved her into the penthouse within the week, walk-in closet, personal driver, a black card with no visible limit, the full, polished performance of a life that was supposed to feel like winning. She posted everything, every restaurant, every weekend trip, every rooftop at golden hour. The comments poured in like rainfall. Goals. She ate and left absolutely 0 crumbs, living her best life, period. And Sophia, who had once found her sense of self in the quiet, steady affection of a man who remembered exactly how she liked her coffee, now found it in comments from strangers who had no idea who she actually was. She told herself she was happy. She had to be. Because the alternative, that she had made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake, was not something she was prepared to sit with. So she kept posting, kept smiling, kept telling herself this was the life she had always deserved. She almost believed it. Until the night she walked past Marcus's study and heard him on a phone call, and what he said, laughing, easy, completely unbothered, turned her entire world to dust. Yes, she's useful. She photographs well. Clients respond to her? At events? No, nothing serious. I mean, a pause, a short, careless laugh. She actually thought I was going to marry her. I know, adorable, right? Sophia stood in the hallway, her hand pressed over her mouth, the designer bag on her arm, a bag that cost $4,000, felt in that moment like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She said nothing. She went back to the bedroom. She was pretending to be asleep when Marcus came in. In the morning, she made them both coffee and smiled over the rim of her cup, as if nothing in the world had changed. because she had nowhere to go. Her apartment lease was gone. Her savings spent. Her pride, that particular iron pride that had once felt like strength, would not let her call her family and confess what she had done to Daniel. So she stayed and smiled and posted, while across the city, in a glass-walled office that hadn't existed 6 months ago, Daniel Carter's name was beginning to appear in places that would make Sophia's chest tighten if she ever saw them. The Series A funding had closed at $6.2 million, not the original 4.7, more, because when the lead investors had seen the full scope of what CarterLink could do, they had gone back to their partners and doubled down. Daniel hired a team, moved into a real office, traded the rented suit for something that actually fit, and he worked with a focused, almost relentless consistency, not driven by bitterness, not chasing anything, just moving the way he had always moved, toward the thing he had always been building toward. His best man, James, who covered the technology sector for a major digital publication, called him 3 months after the altar. "Danny, I need to write a piece about you. What you've built, the trajectory of this thing, people need to read this story." "Not yet," Daniel said. "Well, why not, Danny? Give it another 3 months, James." A pause on the line. "Why 3 months specifically?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because I want it to be undeniable." He was not chasing revenge. He had told himself that from the very first night, sitting on his kitchen floor. Revenge was a distraction, but he was also, with quiet, absolute clarity, not going to hide. A Forbes contributor included CarterLink in a roundup of startups to watch. His LinkedIn went from 300 connections to 14,000 in 60 days. Industry newsletters started picking up the name. Procurement directors at Fortune 500 companies were asking their teams to look into it. And one evening, in October, a colleague of Sophia's, a woman named Priya, who had always been quietly fond of Daniel, saw the Forbes mention. She took a screenshot and sent it to Sophia with one word: "Wow." Sophia stared at the photo on her screen for a very long time. Daniel in a navy suit. His company's logo on the wall behind him. That same quiet, private smile she had never quite been able to read. The caption beneath the image read, "Daniel Carter, founder and CEO of CarterLink, the logistics startup that just closed a $6.2 million Series A and is being called the most disruptive platform in the industry." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. "Get dressed, Hamilton Group Gala tonight. Wear the red dress." Sophia set her phone, face down, on the bed, and for the first time since she had walked out of that church, she felt it. Real, cold, settling fear. The Hamilton Group Gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel on a Tuesday evening in November. The kind of event where the champagne is $200 a glass and the conversations are worth considerably less. Marcus moved through the room with the practiced ease of a man who needed everyone in it to know he belonged. He shook hands. He laughed at the right moments. He kept one hand on the small of Sophia's back, not tenderly, she had learned, but territorially. She had stopped, confusing the two. She was wearing the red dress. She smiled at everyone Marcus introduced her to. She said the right things. She laughed when she was supposed to laugh. She had become very good at all of it. And then, across the room, she saw him. Daniel. He was standing with a group of men near the far window, all of them in expensive suits, all of them leaning slightly toward him, in that particular way that people lean toward whoever holds the most gravity in a room. He was speaking quietly. They were listening with the full, undivided attention that cannot be performed, only earned. He looked different. Not just the suit, which was charcoal grey, perfectly fitted, not just the posture, or the easy way he held his drink. He looked, decided, like a man who had made a fundamental decision about who he was, and had not questioned it for even 1 second since. Something complicated happened in Sophia's chest. Marcus followed her gaze, squinted across the room. "Hey, is that Daniel Carter? The Carter Link guy?" He was already straightening, already moving into networking mode. "I need to talk to that man. We've been trying to get his team into a room for 6 weeks. He keeps declining the meetings." "Marcus!" But he was already moving, hand around her wrist, pulling her across the room, toward the man she had left at the altar. Daniel saw Marcus coming, and then, over Marcus's shoulder, he saw Sophia, and his face did not change, not a flicker, not a flinch, not a single wound visible anywhere on the surface, just stillness, complete and absolute stillness. "Daniel Carter?" Marcus extended his hand with the particular energy of a man who urgently needs something. "Marcus Hale, I have to say what you're building is extraordinary, genuinely. We've been following your work very closely at Hamilton." Daniel shook his hand. "Thank you?" He said it simply, without inflation. Then his eyes moved just briefly to Sophia. 1 second, 2. A look that contained nothing she could grab onto. Then back to Marcus. "And you must be—" "Sophia," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Sophia Reeves." "Sophia." He said her name, the way you say the name of a street you used to live on, familiar, but no longer inhabited. "It's good to see you." Then he turned back to Marcus and talked about business, and did not look at her again. What happened next, what Marcus did, right there, in that ballroom in front of everyone, was something that would follow Sophia Reeves for the rest of her life. Marcus running on champagne and the kind of desperation that powerful men go to great lengths to disguise as confidence, reached into his jacket pocket and produced his business card. He held it out to Daniel. Daniel looked at it. Then, with complete politeness and zero apology, "I appreciate that. I should be transparent with you, though. We're currently in the final stage of a bidding process for our Series B advisory contract. 3 firms are competing. If Hamilton Group wants to be considered, the right move would be to have your managing director reach out to my COO directly. We close the process at end of next week." There was a brief silence. Someone in the group let out a barely audible intake of breath. Marcus's smile did not move, but behind his eyes something shifted. "Of course," he said. "Absolutely. We'll be in touch." He shook Daniel's hand again, too firmly this time, and steered Sophia away. Hamilton Group did not get the contract. Carter Link chose a different firm. Marcus received the news on a Thursday afternoon. He was in a bad mood for the rest of that week. The temperature in the penthouse dropped several degrees. The dinners became infrequent. The compliments stopped entirely. The black card was quietly deactivated one morning. No explanation. No discussion. Sophia discovered it at a pharmacy when she tried to buy aspirin. And then, on a Tuesday in December, Marcus came home with a cardboard box. Her things were already inside it. "This isn't working," he said. Flat, final, already looking at his phone. "My assistant will arrange a car." No argument, no guilt, no trace of the man who had once leaned across a champagne glass and told her she was too beautiful to be with someone ordinary. Just a door. And then closed. Sophia stood in the lobby of that building, the same lobby she had glided through so many times, head high, bag on arm, holding a cardboard box. The doorman didn't make eye contact, and outside, on the sidewalk, with nowhere to go and no one she could bear to call, she finally understood the full weight of what she had done. She called her sister first, then her closest friend, then a colleague from work. One by one, each conversation revealed the same truth. She had been out running since June. They all knew what she had done to Daniel at that altar. It had travelled, the note, the 4 words the rented suit that didn't quite fit. In their social world, it had become one of those stories, the kind that circulates at dinner parties told in lowered voices. "Did you hear what happened to that guy? Can you imagine?" Nobody needed to say Sophia's name. Everybody knew it. Her sister took her in. A narrow spare bed, a room that smelled like laundry detergent, the sound of children in the hallway at 6 every morning. Sophia lay on that bed and stared at the ceiling. On her phone, Daniel's LinkedIn. A new post. Carter Link had just signed its first Fortune 500 client, a major American retail group. The comments section flooded. This team, visionary. Nobody in the industry saw this coming. She typed his name into the search bar 17 times over 3 days. She never sent a message. On the 18th time, on a Thursday night in January, with rain against the window and the sound of her sister's family asleep down the hall, she made a decision. She opened a new message, typed carefully, deleted it, rewrote it, read it 4 times, thought about closing the app. Opened it again, then, before she could stop herself, she pressed send. "Daniel, I know I have absolutely no right to contact you. I know what I did cannot be undone. I just need you to know I am sorry for everything. I was wrong about you, about everything." She watched the screen. 1 check, 2 checks, read. And then silence. 6 minutes of silence that felt like 6 hours, and then her phone lit up. Daniel's reply was 3 sentences. "Sophia, thank you for saying that. I want you to know I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, for me. I hope you find what you're looking for." That was all. No anger, folded into careful language. No bitterness, wearing the costume of politeness. No revenge hidden in the subtext. Just 3 sentences, dignified, final, already looking forward. 3 sentences that somehow contained more genuine decency than anything Marcus Hale had ever said to her across 6 months in a 42-floor penthouse. And Sophia Reeves, who had not cried since she walked out of that church, cried. Not the composed, careful tears of someone managing a narrative. Real ones. The kind that arrive when you finally stop running and turn around and see clearly for the first time exactly what you left behind and exactly what you chose instead. She had walked away from a man who loved her, fully, quietly, without performance or condition. And she had traded him for a man who had categorized her as useful and forgotten her before the car had even arrived. And the man she had left had not become small in her absence. He had not waited for her to come back. He had just moved, quietly, steadily, like he had always moved, like he had always planned to. But the story was not finished, because 6 weeks later, Sophia Reeves would walk into a job interview, and the name above the building's door would stop her in the street. Carter Link had posted a senior communications director role. Sophia's recruiter had sent her the listing without knowing the connection, without knowing anything about that church or that note or that ring set down on a hotel vanity table like a period at the end of a sentence. Sophia had almost not applied. She had left the listing open on her laptop for 2 full days. But she needed the work. She was genuinely qualified, and she told herself there was no reason to assume Daniel would even be in the room. She applied. The first interview was with HR. It went well. The second was with the head of marketing. It went better. The third, a final round panel, she was called back in on a Wednesday morning in February. She wore a dark blazer, a good bag she had prepared for a week. She was ready. She walked into the conference room. 4 people sat around the long table. And at the head of that table, in a charcoal grey suit, hands folded, that same private, unhurried smile, was Daniel Carter. The world contracted. Sophia stood in the doorway. For exactly 1 second, maybe 2. Daniel looked at her. One measured even look, then down at his notes. "Miss Reeves," he said. Thank you for coming in. Please, take a seat. The interview lasted 45 minutes. He asked professional questions. He was precise. He was fair. He gave nothing away, no warmth, but also no coldness. Just the focused, even-handed attention of a man who ran a good company and intended to keep running it well. When it ended, he stood, extended his hand. "We'll be in touch within the week." His handshake was brief and firm. Sophia walked to the elevator, pressed the button, stood very straight until the doors closed, and then finally let herself breathe. The call came 4 days later, and what Daniel decided right then in that phone call is the part of this story that tells you exactly who he was, and always had been. Carter Link did not offer Sophia the role. His COO made the call, professional, brief, gracious. They had gone with another candidate. Thank you for your time. But what no one at Carter Link knew except Daniel was what he had done before that call was made. He had picked up his phone and made 2 calls of his own, 2 people in his network, 2 leaders of companies he trusted and respected, good places to work, places that valued exactly the kind of skills Sophia actually had. "There's a communications professional who interviewed with us recently," he said to each of them. "Her name is Sophia Reeves. She's qualified. She'd be an asset. I thought of you." He did not explain the history. He did not mention the church or the note or what those 4 words had cost him on a kitchen floor in June. He just made the calls. Because that was who he was. Because he had meant every word when he had typed that message about forgiveness not being for her, but for himself. Sophia was offered a role at one of those companies 3 weeks later. A real role, a fresh start, a place where she could build something again. She never found out about those phone calls. And Daniel Carter, 12 months after standing at an altar in a slightly too big rented suit, closed his Series B round at $28 million. James wrote the piece he had been waiting a year to write. The headline read, "Daniel Carter built a $28 million company in the year that nearly destroyed him. He says it was never about revenge." In the interview, James leaned forward. "I have to ask, Danny, was any part of this, the drive, the pace, the way you worked, was it about proving something to someone specific?" Daniel thought about it for a genuine moment. Then he said, "No, I had a plan. Before any of this happened, the plan didn't change. The reason I believed in it did." What was the reason? Daniel looked at his hands, then back up, that quiet smile. "I needed to know that what I was building was real. Not to impress anyone, not to win anything. Just because it was real. Because it mattered. Because I mattered." James published the piece on a Thursday morning. By Friday, it had been shared 40,000 times. Here is what I want you to take with you from this story. Sophia Reeves looked at Daniel Carter and saw a number. She calculated his worth in apartment square footage and watch brands and the size of a diamond on her hand. And the number she arrived at was wrong. Not because she was calculating incorrectly, but because she was measuring the entirely wrong things. A person's real value, their actual enduring value, is not in what they have today. It is in who they are, in how they move when the world is hard and the floor is cold and nobody is watching, in what they build in silence for reasons that have nothing to do with other people, in how they treat the people who wronged them when they finally have every reason and every opportunity not to. Daniel Carter lost everything in that church on a Saturday morning in June. And then he went home and worked and forgave and moved without bitterness, without performance, without waiting for a moment of triumph to validate what he already knew about himself. He did not need Sophia to come back and see what she had missed. He did not need Marcus to lose the contract. He did not need the Forbes mention or the $28 million or the 40,000 shares to prove something. He just needed to keep building the thing that was real. The tables did not turn because the universe owed Daniel Carter a favor. They turned because Daniel Carter never for a single day stopped building the table. If this story moved you, if you have ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your patience for weakness, your silence for surrender, your kindness for something they were owed, share this video because someone out there needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this, the ones that remind you that loyalty, integrity, and quiet, consistent effort will always outlast arrogance, subscribe. We have more coming, because the real ones always rise, always